Mandla Mkhwanaz is the Group Chief Process Officer for Transnet SOC Limited. I will leave Mandla to give further details, to introduce himself further. And his topic will be digital economy in South Africa, opportunities and challenges. Mandla. You have to unmute yourself. Mandla.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately enough, you could see that I'm already started talking, but without while I'm muting.
I'll make you a co-host.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Issa. Thank you very much for inviting me as a panelist for this very, very, to me, high and very interesting topic, and also the panelist, which I hold with high regards in terms of different backgrounds and disciplines of profession where you come from. So then also myself, I feel very honored that I could be part of this and be invited to share my few words around some of the experience and expertise on my line of business and also my professional life, which I'm gonna allude to it. So yes, the Transnet Chief Process Officer was one of my roles within Transnet, which subsequent to that, I assume a role of a digital business leader. That obviously was to do with close enough to the topic of today, that digital transformation was one area which Transnet took it to heart, very hard, to make sure that we also follow the trends of what is happening locally, globally, in terms of digitization of the organization, and also participate on digitization within the country as part of South Africa. And maybe let me allude to say Transnet is wholly owned by the government of South Africa. So we position ourselves as part of the public sector at large, if you were to allow me to use those sectors. If you allow me to use such sectors.
Please mute yourself, Yvonne.
You know when you get to that stage?
Sorry, Mandla, hold on. Moderator, please mute everyone. Yeah. Charles, can you please take charge and mute everyone, please?
Okay, he's muted now. Mandla, sorry.
Yes, if you allow me to use the sector, the public sector is one of the sectors which we normally refer to those who are privately owned and those who are government or state-owned. We are a state-owned company as Transnet. And that's one part. That's where I work, and that's where actually my bills are paid from that income in terms of the living. But I do have other roles which I have outside Transnet. I'm part of the BRICS Council of South African chapter, which everyone knows the BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, and China, South Africa. But I will just zoom into the South African portion of the BRICS, that South Africa do represent, as much as it's stated as a country, is actually represent the continent. So we see ourselves as equal partners in the BRICS community, because we also come with a 1 point something billion, 1.2, 1.3, depending on the numbers at the time. But we are above $1 billion as the continent. If we talk of the population, that means that makes the market like other countries like China is I think they're going to 1.4 billion. India is 1 point something to 2 or 3. And actually then if we take ourselves like that, we actually even surpass the Russians, because Russia are less than 1 billion in their community, in their population. So we take ourselves as a representative of the continent in that BRICS community, which has come also with its own upset in the market, if I can put it that way, because it's a new, not sure when it ends to be new, but it's a new player on the block with the previous players, like the other blocks, like your European community, or also the Americans, obviously, the North America, and other communities or economies like that, especially the first world economies. So if you look at this grouping, it's come from the so-called underdeveloped, but obviously it's questionable today whether China will be called underdeveloped in Russia. So those are semantics today. So the other area which I participate on is the Public Sector ICT Forum, which is part of what we developed or we started in South Africa in 2016. With looking, as I said, these sectors, the private and public sector, we're looking that most of the time there is this narrative or there is this view which says most of the excellence or best thing come from the private sector, and public sector doesn't have such, or they learn from the private sector. We took a different view that the public sector can also do have a pocket of excellence. Actually, private sector also learn from the public sector. So I chair that forum just to focus on the public sector, as I stated that Transnet belongs to that sector, which in the main, in the continent, most of the railway companies or the ports, and those are mainly owned by states in the public sector. So that's what linked what with it today. So we are in the era of new normal, they call it. I would use the word new normal. We'll all, I don't know, at some point agree when the new normal ends, but through COVID or during the COVID era, COVID-19, when it started, it hit it globally. Is one of the pandemic or the era which, like your fourth industrial revolution, which hit the whole globe, everyone, every country, how small you are, how big you are affected by this COVID-19 pandemic. And also it impacts in a different way, whether you're a first world country or maybe a so-called third world countries or underdeveloped countries, which our continent as Africa, we seems to be classified as underdeveloped sometimes, or the third world continent. So, but what is positive about the COVID-19 era is that the continent, which has always been taken as if it comes behind, some refer to it as a dark continent, is that actually the impact of the pandemic has not impacted the way it was anticipated for many different reasons. I attribute this without following, I'm not a scientist, without following what the scientists and the other analysts are saying. On my side, I take it from a positive point of view that we are a young continent. The last average age of the continent in age was 19.5 of years. That makes us a young generation continent. We made up of that generation, and we're more energetic, we're more, maybe from health-wise point of view, we're still more strong and healthy. And that's how I take it, being not a doctor, a scientist. I take it that has been our advantage on actually riding this COVID-19 era the way we have, and the impact it has affected us, that not in the same as the likes of Nia. I know he's based in Germany there, and I know some of my panelists there based in UK, the impact there has been very hard. And we feel for you guys, and we always learning from what the experience of these countries which are hit hard, like Italy and France. We're learning from them as South Africa and in the continent, so that we can also prevent some of the things which can affect us. So just now moving to the topic of today, which I've alluded to it, COVID-19, the reason I emphasize or introduce it in that way is that COVID-19 has helped us to accelerate the fourth industrial revolution trends or technology adoption, I call it that way. Because the fourth industrial revolution is on its own, is just the period or the era like we had in the third and first and the second revolution, industrial revolution. I'm not gonna dwell on them, taking that my colleagues, everyone who's around here understand the first and second and third, but the fourth, it's dominated by the trends of technology, new technology trends, which has come about. For example, we see that digitization is one of those technologies which is found itself in that space, but is actually enabled by different technologies, which I will talk on them later, around drones, technologies which have been used so highly these days. I will specifically talk to them in terms of the rail of the topic of today. 3D printing is one of the technologies which is part of the digitization, which caused the fourth industrial revolution to be accelerated now after COVID. And we also have machine learning, which is one area of digitization. And also we have also what affect the space, the IoT, what is referred as IoT. IoT is the Internet of Things. On a layman description is the devices which we all see are across all other space, which we put in. Some of them are part of our phones we carry today. Some are part of the laptops or any other areas. We have a talk, maybe the fridges at home. They also come with these devices where it's got an IoT device. It can actually see as you pull certain things in the fridge, and it says that then you need to refill. Some people have connected it where they've managed to do that, connected with the supply chain, where then the supermarket will supply your fresh produced in your fridge. They can put in the meat. They can say, yeah, your meat is running out, or your fresh produce, your milk, your cheese is running out. So they start order from the supply chain, value chain there, or the supermarket, your preferred supermarket, and start delivering. Then you have the, so like today, the Uber Eat or Uber delivery, which are also enabled by these technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. So you find that the supermarket will then deliver whatever has been replenished on your fridge at home through these technologies. So these technologies do a lot of things. That was just one example of it. In our space, from a railway point of view, we have used these technologies for ourselves, for example, to track some of our fleet on some of the lines which cross across the about 6 or 7 continents. We've piloted this, it worked very well, where we track the wagons which leave the Richards Bay port of in South Africa going to Andorra in DRC. So it goes past Zimbabwe, for example, Lawayo, up to Zambia, Livingston there. And it also goes across Mozambique and through up to DRC, as I said, Lubumbashi. So we can track while we're in South Africa, which in the past we didn't have this technology, where we can see the train as it moves in real time. Obvious, because of connectivity and technologies in different countries, we had to pilot this and test which country is strong on what connectivity. So we use satellite in this connectivity. We use GSM, which is some of our mobile providers, service providers in the continent in different countries. We also use some of the connectivities which work like your what you call the satellites, which work in that space. So those are all connectivities we've used. So we've started to do digitization in our railways, and currently we're also doing digitization in the space of pipeline, where we're tracking the activities or the servitude in the pipeline. We're also doing this in our ports, where we've actually deployed drones, where in the past we'd have used a diver to go to a port and check, assess the pollution at the port of water, because it's part of environmental regulations and all that. And as you understand that ocean economy, which is an economy on its own, it actually provides sometimes a pollution within our ports, which we need to clean up. So in the past, we'd use a human being to go down, but you can put a human being that long to go down there. It has to come out, you can't sustain. But with the drones, you can put a drone 24 hours or even 7 days a week. It's down there, it actually assesses the water, it sends the data, and the divers are now not under the water, but they sit in the office where they look at the computer, they analyze the data, they are able to tell the rate of pollution in the port. So those are the things which we're looking at. And the trains, we put cameras as the train travels along our railway lines. We used to have a challenge around the flooding of the soil within some of the railway lines. So it will then affect the strength of the railway. And when the train travel along that line, it's got a risk of derailments. And because nobody has seen, or the maintenance crew, it's not due for maintenance, that line. So we didn't know that actually the railway line is under threat for that. So with the cameras now on the trains and drones, which we also fly over the railway lines, we can actually assess the health and how good the line is for the train to travel without derailments, without the risk of the crew being derailed or even have fatal injuries. So when I touch on the crew, one of the digitization technologies which have been added on this space is driverless train. A driverless train, I think in Europe, we've seen this happening already, but in the passenger trains, where trains are just moving along but without any driver. But we started now to see the fourth industrial revolution developing technologies where the train can travel, even the freight, the train which carries cargo, which some of them is very precious cargo from our mining products, for example, like copper products from DRC, for example, which we pick up on this train I've alluded to earlier. When the train comes back from DRC, it comes back with such product. So those products are high value products. We need to make sure they are secured. That's why most of the owners of these products or customers or suppliers of this product, they've preferred to use trucks versus railway. And that has affected our railways in terms of development. The trucks or the roads have taken over more of this cargo, which is actually was supposed to be on rail, and our rail now has suffered. So with this introduction of technologies, we're now able to give assurance to the customer or the cargo owner to say, even though it's a precious cargo like copper or some kind of those precious cargos, we will be managed to monitor it as it moves on real time. When there's interruption on the train, when it stops for some reason or the other, will be able to know or to see the surroundings of the train and understand whether it's just a train failure, is a mechanical failure, or it stopped because of tampering, because people maybe want to attack the train for criminal activities, because they want to take over or take the cargo which is there. So we're able to do that, and we're able to use this IoT device, which I've mentioned, by analyzing the data, also coming up to our National Operations Center, which reside in Johannesburg. They are able to see and predict. And some of the communication we have on this device on our new train, we have developed as Transnet a new locomotives, which we call it, it's developed by Africans for the Africans, for the African continent, and we are proud about it. In the past, we had most of our locomotives being developed or supplied by the suppliers or OEMs, the so-called AEMs, equipment or OEMs, the owners of equipment machines, manufacturing machines, OEMs. I'm trying to get the full name without using the abbreviation. So that in the past it was the likes of Bombardier, the likes of your German companies, or some of them were even in US, like your General Electric. So we were using all our locomotives, which are imported from these countries or continent. Today, China also supplies some of these locomotives, and I think Japan also supply through some of their companies like Mitsubishi, for example. So, but today we have, as Transnet, developed our own locomotives, which is developed in the continent, developed by the young engineers which sit in Pretoria. They developed these locomotives which can be used for the first time in the world. We have a locomotive which doesn't need a driver to leave the locomotive. If the train, let's say, I'm gonna use an example, coming from the coast facing east to west, and the driver will be in front facing west. When now the train comes back from west to east, a driver will move from that cabin and come to the cabin in the front of the train, which is facing east. But this locomotive, which is the first in the world, is that you can use it without the driver leaving the locomotive. So it uses it whether, or you can call it in reverse, but it still sits, whether it's facing west or east, the driver doesn't leave the cabin of this locomotive. Those are part of technologies we've developed. That's why I say again that the continent has got a lot of excellence and engineering, and some of the technologies which we have developed, which we're sharing within the continent, because this locomotive we're being currently we're marketing it across the continent in some of the railway countries, companies in the continent, most especially in the SADC region. We have what we call the South African Railway Association, SARA, which sits a conference every May, around May, June. Last year we showcased this locomotive. We even showcased the pilot we're running for this digitization. So there's a lot we're sharing, and currently we have some project in Nigeria where they need to revamp, say, their new railway lines. This project started first, was led by General Electric, who was leading this project, and then later General Electric, as you all know, has been sold to other owners, and with that interruption on their ownership, they handed over the leadership of this project to Transnet to lead it for this. It's a huge revamp and new railway lines being developed and also approved through the cabinet in Nigeria. And I did talk to my colleagues earlier that I have been to some of this discussion with the Minister of Nigeria, where we've been discussing these potential collaboration and new railway lines and the revamp of railway in Nigeria. There is also a project in Kenya, which Transnet is working on. They include the port and also the railway connectivity in Luma. We're working on projects like that. In Ghana,
Mandla,
we also...
Sorry to interrupt. How long do you still have?
I was wrapping up,
okay,
trying
all right.
to just link it with some projects in the continent. It was part of my last statement.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Even in DRC and Zimbabwe, I think the current president, as he sit as a new president, he signed in the first week, he signed a contract with Transnet for 4 billion contract on the railway for Zimbabwe. So those are all the sharing of technology and what we're doing as a continent to actually improve our railway lines going forward with that technology. Thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Mandla, for a brilliant presentation. We've heard a lot. We've talked about accelerate. We've talked about machine learning, tracking the fleet, satellite GSM, of digitalization in the railway pipeline ports, deployment of drones, accessing water and sending data, putting cameras in trains, driverless train, and that what I was very happy to hear was that we are kind of trailblazing in terms of the driverless train, and that you are looking at it as an African-wide rather than a South African-wide, and that you are having, you know, like projects in different countries. And another interesting thing was that part of the pilot that you have talked to us about, the trains have been across 6 countries within Africa. And that is very impressive. So I'm sure a lot of people would ask you questions later, but let us hold fire on that.